Good morning. For regulating the acid-base balance and to maintain pH, we have been equipped with three defense mechanisms. The first line of defense is buffer, next lungs, and third is kidney. In this, about buffers, we have already discussed in the previous video. So in this video, I'll be discussing mainly about the regulation of acid-base balance by lungs and kidneys. First, let's start with the respiratory regulation. As a result of metabolism, large quantities of acids are produced in our body. These acids can be broadly classified into two types. One is volatile and the other one is non-volatile acids. In this, the volatile acid, that means the carbonic acid, is removed from the body as carbon dioxide by our lungs. So this is its role in maintaining the acid-base balance. So how this excretion of carbon dioxide varies according to the blood pH, we will discuss in detail. Whenever there is acidosis, what do you mean by acidosis? It is decreased blood pH. So this decreased blood pH will be sensed by various central and peripheral chemoreceptors. So these receptors, after sensing the fall in pH, they will send the information to the respiratory center present in the medulla. So after receiving the information, that means that the blood pH is less. Respiratory center in turn will send a stimulatory signal to the respiratory muscles, leading to hyperventilation. Okay, so when you hyperventilate, what will happen? All the carbon dioxide will be released from our body. So what will happen? The carbon dioxide level or the carbonic acid level in the blood decreases. So when the acid level decreases, what will happen to the pH? It will start to increase and it will try to balance the pH. This is what happens whenever acidosis is happening. Okay, so this is how lungs respond for acidosis. Okay, and try to compensate for the pH. This is the role of lung in during acidosis condition. Whereas during alkalosis, it is just the reverse. So whenever the pH is increased, what will happen means the same receptors will sense this and they will send the information to the respiratory medulla. Upon receiving information that the blood pH is more, this time the medulla, the respiratory center, it will send inhibitory signal to the respiratory muscles, leading to hypoventilation. So hypoventilation means slow breathing. So what will happen? The carbon dioxide will start accumulating in our blood, leading to carbonic acid formation, which in turn will try to decrease the pH, and thus it balances the pH. This is how lungs helps in regulating the acid-base balance. So during acidosis, hyperventilation will be there so that more acids will be washed out so that blood comes back to normal, pH comes back to normal. Whereas during alkalosis, hypoventilation will manifest, which results in accumulation of carbonic acid, decrease in pH, and trying to control the pH. Okay, so this is how the lungs help in acid-base balance. Next, we will see about the role of kidney in acid-base regulation. So I said the volatile acid, the carbonic acid, is excreted by lungs, whereas the non-volatile acids are excreted mainly by the kidney. That is one of the primary function of kidney. Apart from excreting acids, kidney also increases the base. That means it increases the alkali reserve by increasing the bicarbonate levels in our body. So how it does this means by two ways. One is it increases the reabsorption of filtered bicarbonate so that it is not lost in the urine and the bicarbonate level in the blood will be increased. Okay. On the other hand, the renal tubular cells has the ability to generate new bicarbonate also. So by both these process, the kidney will try to increase the alkali reserve or bicarbonate level in the blood so that it can act as a buffer for to counterattack the acidic pH. Okay, so these are the two major functions. One is increases the excretion of volatile acid. Second, it increases the bicarbonate levels. So how it increases the bicarbonate levels, we will see in detail. First, let us start with the generation of bicarbonate. Okay, so consider this is the renal tubular cell. The center one is the renal tubular cell. On one side, it is having tubular lumen through which the filtrate or the urine passes out. On the other end, we will be having plasma through which blood passes. Okay, so now we will see how the tubular cells generates the bicarbonate. Like in any other cell, our renal tubular cells also, they take up oxygen and they will produce carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide produced within the cell, they will dissolve in the aqueous medium of the cytoplasm and they will form carbonic acid. This carbonic acid form, it will dissociate immediately to form H plus and bicarbonate ion. Carbonic acid will dissociate to produce H plus and bicarbonate ion. In this, the H plus ions formed, okay, it will be thrown out into the renal tubular lumen. It will be thrown out into the lumen with the help of a transporter called as sodium H plus antipode. Okay, so what is the function of this antipode means? For every H plus thrown out, one sodium will be taken into the renal tubular cells. Now this sodium along with the bicarbonate form will be thrown into the plasma, and thus it helps to increase the serum bicarbonate levels. Okay, so this is the first role of kidney in generating the bicarbonate levels. Renal tubular cells, they generate bicarbonate and they will take it, throw it into the plasma. For every bicarbonate thrown into the plasma, one H plus ions will be excreted into the tubular lumen, so that it will be excreted through the urine. Okay, so this is how it plays. Okay, so for this, one of the important enzyme required for the reaction is, for this generation of bicarbonate, is carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So this enzyme is required for both these reactions, conversion of carbon dioxide to water and water to carbonic acid, and also for the dissociation of carbonic acid. Both we need, for both the reactions we need carbonic anhydrase. Okay, so thus renal tubules helps in generating the new bicarbonate. Okay, so here for every bicarbonate synthesized and thrown into the plasma, one H plus ions will be thrown into the renal tubular lumen. Okay, so this generation of bicarbonate, it takes place throughout the renal tubular cells, starting from proximal convoluted tubule to collecting deck. This reaction takes place everywhere. Okay, so everywhere for one bicarbonate thrown into the plasma, one H plus will be entering into the lumen. Okay, so if these H plus ions are all these H plus ions are poured directly into the urine, what will happen means urine pH will become more acidic and it can completely corrode the urinary tract. In order to prevent this, or in order to avoid this, what kidney does means it either utilizes this H plus ions for some other purpose, or it modifies it so that the pH is not altered much. Okay, so how this happens, we will see in detail next. So I said this takes place, the excretion of H plus ions takes place throughout the renal tubular cells. But in the proximal convoluted tubule, what will happen means the H plus ions released will be utilized for reabsorbing the filtered bicarbonate. Okay, so what will happen means the H plus ions which are released from the renal tubular cells, they will bind with the filtered bicarbonate and they will be forming carbonic acid. This carbonic acid, as such, it cannot enter into the renal tubular cells. So what will happen means they will first dissociate to form carbon dioxide and water, which in turn can easily diffuse into the renal tubular cells. Once it comes in within the cells, this carbon dioxide and water will again join with each other. Okay, the reaction which happened in the tubular lumen will be reversed now. Okay, so both the side, the enzyme is same, carbonic anhydrase, but it will be just reversed inside the tubular cell. So carbon dioxide and water will rejoin to form carbonic acid, and that carbonic acid will dissociate to form H plus and bicarbonate. Okay, now as usual, this bicarbonate will be thrown into the plasma, whereas H plus will be thrown into the tubular lumen. Okay, so this is what happens. This is how the bicarbonate filtered by the glomerulus is reabsorbed into the reabsorbed back to the plasma with the help of renal tubular cells using the H plus ions excreted from it. Okay, so this is the second step by which kidney helps in regulating the acid balance. Okay, next, so in proximal convoluted tubule, the H plus released is used for reabsorbing bicarbonate, whereas in the other parts, that means in distal convoluted tubule or in collecting duct, they are Henle's loop, there and all, what will happen means the H plus released, okay, it will be buffered either by two different buffers. One is ammonia buffer and the other one is phosphate buffer. Okay, so ammonia buffer, how ammonia is produced means renal tubular cells, inside the cell, it contains an enzyme called as glutaminase. So this glutaminase will break the glutamine and it releases the ammonia into the tubular lumen. So this ammonia will bind with the H plus ions and they will be excreted as ammonium ions, so that urine pH is not altered much. Okay, so this is how some H plus ions are excreted with buffered and excreted as ammonium ions, whereas most of the other H plus ions, they will be excreted as sodium phosphates. Okay, they will be excreted as by the phosphate buffers. Okay, so phosphate buffer is made up of two components. One is acid component and the other one is base component. Okay, one with the extra H plus is hydrogen ion is called as acid component, whereas one with the extra sodium is called as base component. Okay, so now in this base component, they will bind with the excreted H plus and they will convert it into sodium acid phosphates. Okay, and in urine, the most of the H plus ions excreted will be coming out to the urine mainly as this sodium acid phosphate. Okay, so thus this forms the one of the major titratable acids present in the urine. Okay, so that's it about the role of kidney in regulating the acid-base balance. Primarily, it has two roles. One is to excrete the non-volatile acids like lactic acid, keto acid, and other acids which are formed in the body as a result of metabolism will be excreted by the kidney. Okay. Second thing is it increases the bicarbonate level. So how it increases the bicarbonate level means again by two mechanisms. One is by generating new bicarbonate, and the other one is reabsorbing the filtered bicarbonate. Okay. So during this generation reabsorption takes place in the proximal convoluted tubule, but the generation takes place throughout the renal tubular cells. Okay, but what is the problem with this generation? For every bicarbonate generated and thrown into the plasma, one H plus ion will be thrown out into the urine, which can drastically reduce the urinary pH. But how this is prevented? By the help of two buffers. One is ammonia buffer, which is produced from glutamine, and the other one is phosphate buffer. Okay, so that's it about the role of kidney in acid-base balance, and role of lungs also we have seen. Okay, so when these two regulation fails, it leads to acid-base disorders. Okay, when lungs are not functioning properly in eliminating the volatile acid carbonic acid, or if kidney is not functioning, then it can lead to acid-base disorders. These acid-base disorders can be broadly classified into two types. One is respiratory disorder and the other one is metabolic disorder. Okay, so respiratory disorder happens due to the failure of pulmonary regulation, whereas metabolic disorders happens due to the failure of renal regulation. Okay, so first of all, what is the function of lungs? It eliminates the carbon dioxide. It eliminates the volatile acid carbonic acid as carbon dioxide. If lungs fails to eliminate this carbonic acid, what will happen? Carbonic acid will accumulate and it can lead to acidosis, and such type of acidosis is called as respiratory acidosis. On the other hand, if the lungs hyperventilate, okay, if it's losing more and more carbon dioxide, the carbonic acid level in the blood will decrease and it can lead to alkalosis. Okay, so such type of alkalosis is called as respiratory alkalosis. Okay, so hyperventilation leads to respiratory alkalosis, whereas decreased ventilation leads to respiratory acidosis. Next, coming to the metabolic disorders, here it is due to the failure of renal regulation. Okay, we all know that the two primary roles of renal regulation is to excrete the acid and to increase the bicarbonate. Okay, suppose if it fails to do this, what will happen? Acids will accumulate and the base level will decrease and it can lead to acidosis, which we call it as metabolic acidosis. On the other hand, if it doesn't exist, okay, what will happen? If the base is more or the acid is less, then it leads to metabolic alkalosis. Okay, so this is an overview about the acid-base disorders. About these acid-base disorders in detail, we'll be discussing in the next video. Thank you.